Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tips. My name is Julian, and in today's episode, we're going to be continuing the series of episodes that I've been making, talking about each individual NHL team, talking about their noteworthy players, and if I think you should consider drafting those players. This episode, contrary to what my background would have you believe, is actually about the Chicago Blackhawks. They're one of the few teams that I actually don't have a jersey for, which is why I got this beautiful Habs jersey hanging right behind me. Now, before we get started, guys, please leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you want notifications for all my preseason content. Let's jump into the content now, and let's start with the Chicago Blackhawks' lines. And I believe the lines will look something like this. There's no guarantee because they really don't have a very good team, so there's a lot of different line combinations that could be possible. On the top line, we got Philip Kurashev, Lucas Reichel, and Petr Kane. On the second line, we have Max Domi, Jonathan Toews, and Raddysh. On that third line, we have Andreas Athanasiou, Colin Blackwell, and Tyler Johnson. So first on the list is Petr Kane. NHL.com has him ranked as the 33 best fantasy player, whereas Yahoo Drafts currently have him as an ADP of 41.6. That's right, guys. Yahoo mock drafts have finally opened up, so you guys can start doing that and seeing exactly where the players that you want to draft rank in the rankings. So you can definitely go and check that out. Now, Petr Kane is still a fantastic player. Ended up with 92 points in 78 games last year, whole lot of shots on goal, and a pretty low shooting percentage, everything considered. Now, Petr Kane doesn't have as good of a team as he did around him last year. Last year, he managed to finish as the 50th best fantasy player with the 11th most shots on goal per game. His plus-minus and point totals, though, will go down this year, unfortunately, without DeBrincat and other competent players around him. There really is not a lot of talent this year in Chicago. The saving grace of all this, though, is that he's almost guaranteed getting traded before the end of the year. The sooner the better for his fantasy value, because playing on Chicago this year is just not going to do anything good for his fantasy value. My advice is, if you do really want Petr Kane, trade for him during the season instead of drafting him, because he is going a tad bit early in my opinion. However, if you do want to draft him, I don't think it's terrible value, because he will get traded to a really good team towards the end of the year, and he could help you single-handedly possibly win your fantasy playoffs if he's actually playing for a good team. Next on the list is Seth Jones. NHL has him ranked at 155, but right now he's going 128th in Yahoo leagues. Last year he finished as the 137th best fantasy player, which is not as good as where he's currently going in Yahoo leagues, and he had the 17th most blocks per game. Now, I don't think Seth Jones is a terrible draft pick at this range. However, like I said, Chicago is going to be a much worse team this year than last year. I mean, his plus-minus was already pretty freaking bad last year, so I'm going to find it hard to believe that it goes worse. And the point production, though, probably is going to dry up a little bit too, because there really isn't that much talent to put the puck in the net. Yeah, he is still going to be the top power play guy in Chicago, going to definitely have a really good opportunity, but there really isn't that much talent there, and that's why I'm personally going to avoid him at 128th. If he does end up falling to around 155, where NHL ranks him, that's a little bit of a better value there for Seth Jones, and even then, I still don't absolutely love him, but it's definitely a better value than where Yahoo currently has him ranked. Then I have Petr Mrazek, who NHL.com obviously doesn't have ranked on their list, and Yahoo actually doesn't have an ADP for him, because pretty much no one is drafting Petr Mrazek, which makes sense. He's the starting goalie for probably the worst team in the NHL this year. Last year, he had a pretty bad season for Toronto in the games that he did play. Did not look good at all. Obviously, Mrazek, though, in seasons prior to that, has been a good goalie. So he could potentially bounce back a little bit in Chicago. Honestly, he's going to have to, because he's going to be starting almost all the games in Chicago. So if you're in a super deep points-based league, you can definitely draft Petr Mrazek if there is no other starting goalies available, because at least he's going to get the starts for you. And as long as he doesn't do absolutely terribly, he won't go negative for you, and will at least get you positive points on the night that he plays. Now, in categories leagues, I'm not going anywhere near Petr Mrazek, because the stats just won't be good. And then I had Jonathan Toews, who had a really bad come back to the NHL last year with only 37 points in 71 games. This really wasn't good in any category except for the face-off win. So if you're in a categories league and you drafted a team and you're like, oh man, I think I'm going to be needing some face-off wins at the very end of the draft, you could consider drafting Jonathan Toews, but that's pretty much all he's good for this year. If he does end up playing with Petr Kane, Jonathan Toews could have a little bit of fantasy value, but that remains to be seen. He's going to have definitely a big bounce back year if he wants to have any kind of fantasy value. Then I had Max Domi, who had a decent season, 39 points in 72 games, split between Columbus and Carolina. wasn't exactly anything too impressive, nothing too crazy. And on Chicago, I have him projected to play on the second line, and I don't think he's going to make that much of a dent for fantasy. If Chicago ever has a super favorable schedule, then he's someone that you could pick up for that week. But honestly, Domi's not someone I'm looking at for fantasy drafts. Then I have Lukas Reichel, who has a very nice position eligibility with both center and left wing eligibility. He's going to have a very prime opportunity in the NHL this year. I have him projected to play on the top line with Patrick Kane. Now, in the small sample size that he's had in the NHL so far, he hasn't exactly impressed. He's only scored 1 point in 11 games, and that was all last year, which doesn't exactly scream, I want to draft you in fantasy. So we're going to have to see how he actually ends up doing, but there's a very good chance that he does end up playing on that top line with Patrick Kane, and maybe that'll get him going, and if he does, then maybe he becomes someone who becomes fantasy valuable, but I'm not going to draft him. We're going to have to wait and actually see him in action before I even consider picking him up. And last but not least, I have Philip Kurashev and Taylor Raddysh, and these are guys that I'm keeping an eye on, but as of now, they don't really have any fantasy value at all. If they do end up playing on a top line with Patrick Kane, they could end up having a teeny bit of value, but honestly, I don't really see it, and I don't think they're going to get any value. Although last year, Raddysh, after being traded to Chicago, had 10 points in 21 games, which isn't terrible, but he'll have to do better than that to have fantasy value. And that's it for this video, guys. As you can see, not a lot of Chicago players that I like this year. They're not going to be a very good team, and that's why I'm going to be pretty much avoiding pretty much anybody on this team this year. Before you go, though, please leave a like, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you want notifications for all of my preseason content, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tipped.